Welcome to the debate. Imagine you go to the doctor and you're feeling perfectly fine.
Right. You've got no symptoms, no fatigue, no pain, nothing.
Exactly. But an artificial intelligence model analyzes like a single biological sample and tells you that you are going to develop type 2 diabetes in exactly 12 months.
And we're not talking about a probability here.
No, it is giving you a certainty. Or imagine a totally different scenario, right? You already have a severe late-stage disease, but an AI maps the exact chemical machinery of your cells and literally prints a custom molecule to fix the broken parts, curing you entirely.
Which sounds wild, but today, these aren't science fiction concepts anymore. They are the absolute new battleground of human biology.
Yeah, they really are. And our central question today is this. Does the true revolutionary power of AI in biology lie in its ability to map and engineer deterministic internal cellular mechanisms, specifically our metabolism?
Right. Or does it lie in its capacity to predict emergent systemic diseases from the massive, complex symbiotic networks of the human microbiome?
Exactly. So I represent the perspective that AI's ultimate value is mechanistic and interventional. It allows us to decode the deterministic engine of the cell to engineer precise, targeted cures.
And I hold the opposing view, naturally. I represent the perspective that AI's unique capability is predictive and systemic. Its greatest power lies in parsing the ecological chaos of the microbiome to, foresee and intercept diseases long before clinical symptoms ever appear.
Well, let's lay the groundwork for why I believe the metabolic approach is the true revolution here. At its core, cellular metabolism is the fundamental engine of life.
Sure.
And when we talk about metabolism, we aren't just talking about burning calories on a treadmill. We are talking about thousands of interconnected chemical reactions happening inside every single cell, orchestrated by enzymes and substrates and regulatory signals.
It's an unfathomably busy environment.
Oh, totally. A single cell hosts over 100,000 metabolites. Things like amino acids, lipids, sugars, all interacting in continuous flux.
And for decades, human researchers were effectively blinded by that complexity, right?
Right. We were fundamentally limited by our own cognitive bandwidth. We completely missed the subtle patterns hidden in the just petabytes of data generated by lab tools like mass spectrometry.
Yeah. The human brain just can't track that many moving parts.
Exactly. But AI changes the paradigm entirely because it processes this multidimensional data at scale. It models metabolic networks as dynamic graphs. So by using graph neural networks, or GNNs, the AI can represent a molecule as a node and a chemical reaction as the line connecting it to another node.
Like mapping a massive transit system?
That's a great way to put it. And the results are staggering. We are seeing these neural networks predict flux alterations, meaning how chemical traffic flows through the cell, with 95% accuracy.
95%? That's really high.
It is. And the core reason this matters is that AI allows us to move beyond merely observing biology to actively engineering it by uncovering hidden stoichiometries, which is essentially the precise mathematical ratio of how chemicals react with one another.
Right.
AI enables true synthetic biology and precision oncology. We aren't just watching the cellular engine run, we are learning to rebuild it to treat disease at its mechanical root.
Well, I understand the appeal of that mechanistic view. I really do. It's the comfort of looking at a machine and fixing a broken gear. But let me explain why the microbiome demands a completely different paradigm.
Go for it.
The microbiome is an open, highly dynamic ecosystem. We are talking about the gut alone hosting 100 trillion microbes from over 1,000 different species.
Which is just a crazy number.
It is. Their DNA outnumbers our human genes by 100 to 1.
That is a staggering ratio to wrap your head around. We are essentially more microbe than human.
Exactly. We're basically walking ecosystems. And to understand what they are doing, we use a technique called shotgun metagenomics.
Right, which is pretty heavy data-wise.
Oh, massively. For those listening, this isn't just, looking at a few bacteria under a microscope. It is taking all the genetic material in a sample, shredding it into tiny pieces, sequencing them, and letting a computer piece the puzzle back together to see exactly who is living in the gut and what metabolic functions they are actually performing.
Okay, but you're generating gigabytes of data there.
Exactly. Gigabytes of data detailing incredibly complex temporal shifts in the ecosystem over time.
But how does an AI look at that massive soup of genetic data and actually predict a disease? I mean, practically speaking.
By tracking time. Traditional medicine, as you know, waits for overt late-stage symptoms, bloating, fatigue, a change in blood work. But AI allows us to capture the temporal dynamics of this ecosystem. By utilizing deep learning, specifically recurrent neural networks and long short-term memory networks, often called LSTNs, the AI can remember and contextualize sequential shifts. It doesn't just look at a snapshot, it watches a movie.
So it sees the trend before it becomes a problem.
Exactly. So a subtle drop in a specific bacterial strain in, say, week 12 might signal an inflammatory cascade that will cause a disease months before a patient feels anything. The true revolution here isn't just fixing a broken machine. It is anomaly detection in a massive network. AI is shifting medicine from reactive intervention to prophetic healthcare.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on prediction versus intervention.
All right, let's hear it.
Prediction is ultimately hollow if we don't have the mechanistic tools to actually fix the structural damage. I mean, when a biological system fails, knowing it's going to fail is really only half the battle.
I wouldn't say it's hollow.
Well, think about it like this. If an AI tells you a bridge is going to collapse, that's great, but you still need engineers who know exactly how to forge the steel and replace the beams to save it. AI's ability to intervene at the metabolic level is where the actual cure happens.
But biological systems aren't steel bridges. The damage is often systemic, not just a single broken beam.
Let me use neurodegenerative diseases as an example, right? Look at Alzheimer's disease. The plaques that form in the brain physically disrupt glucose uptake. They are practically starving the brain cells of energy.
Right.
That is a metabolic structural failure. Now, in a landmark 2025 collaboration between Japan's Kyoto University and the U.S. firm In Silico Medicine, they didn't just predict cognitive decline. They used generative AI to design entirely novel molecules targeting mitochondrial dysfunction.
Generative AI, as in the same underlying concept as AI generating text or images, but for chemistry?
Precisely. Instead of generating, a picture of a cat, the AI is generating the molecular blueprint for a drug, atom by atom, specifically designed to fit into a damaged receptor in the mitochondria and repair its energy output.
Well,
Yeah, and they validated this in organoids, which are essentially miniaturized, lab-grown versions of human organs with 90% efficacy.
90% in organoids is impressive. But how did they even map that out?
By simulating billions of microscopic metabolic tweaks in silico, entirely on computers, they slashed the drug development timeline from 10 years down to under 2. That is a mechanistic intervention that alters the physical reality of the disease. We aren't just warning the patient, we are rebuilding the bridge.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why that approach, while deeply impressive on a chemical level, completely misses the broader point of human health.
I wouldn't say it misses the point.
Well, mechanistic cures by their very nature are almost always treating end-stage biological failures. By the time mitochondria are failing in a neurodegenerative state, or by the time a cell is physically starved of glucose, the systemic damage is already catastrophic.
You're saying we are arriving too late to the scene.
Way too late. You are engineering a late-stage repair, trying to put the pieces back together after the explosion has already happened. Let's look at the 2024 Lancet study conducted by researchers from Stanford, Oxford, and Seoul National University.
Okay.
They utilized AI to analyze 5,000 longitudinal microbiome samples. Their model detected the onset of type 2 diabetes 12 months early. And it did this specifically by identifying the depletion of a single type of bacteria called Akkermansia mucinifila.
Let's pause there for a second. For the audience, why does that specific bacteria dropping matter so much? I mean, how does that lead to diabetes?
It's a great question. So Akkermansia mucinifila feeds on the mucin layer, which is the protective slime lining your gut. By feeding on it, it actually encourages your body to produce more of it, keeping the gut barrier thick and healthy.
Huh.
Yeah, and when that bacteria depletes, the lining thins. Toxins leak into the bloodstream, triggering systemic inflammation, which directly causes the body's cells to become resistant to insulin. The AI caught this exact cascade starting. It achieved an area under the curve, or AUC, of 0.96.
Right, and AUC is basically a grading scale for how accurate a predictive model is, correct? Where 1.0 is perfect clairvoyance and 0.5 is basically a coin flip.
Exactly. A 0.96 means the AI is practically seeing the future. Compare that to the traditional HbA1c blood test we use today to diagnose diabetes.
Which is the gold standard right now.
Right, but that only had an AUC of 0.82, and it lagged by 6 months. The microbiome changes reflect diet, antibiotics, and environmental shifts much faster than blood sugar levels do.
Sure, the environment impacts it fast.
If the microbiome is a rainforest, traditional medicine has been waiting until the trees are visibly on fire to call the fire department. AI acts like a satellite, noticing that the soil moisture dropped 3 months ago, allowing us to water the forest before the first spark. Preventing the metabolic breakdown entirely is vastly superior to engineering a targeted molecule after the fact.
Well, that's an interesting point, though. I would definitely frame it differently. You're talking about preventing a breakdown by monitoring environmental noise. But to truly cure a disease, you have to understand the fundamental architecture of the system you are treating. I like to think of cellular metabolism like a highly complex city grid.
A city grid?
Yes. The streets are the metabolic pathways, the cars are the metabolites traveling around, and the traffic lights are the enzymes controlling the flow.
Okay, I can see that.
It is incredibly dense, right? There is an immense amount of traffic, but it is ultimately a bounded system with defined physical rules. A car cannot drive through a building. A chemical reaction cannot violate thermodynamics.
Sure.
AI allows us to map and optimize this grid so the traffic never jams. Consider AI-enhanced flux balance analysis, or AI-FBA.
Which traditionally requires strict mathematical rules to work, doesn't it?
Right, exactly. Traditional FBA optimized these metabolic yields under rigid constraints. It was like programming the city's traffic lights on a static timer. But researchers at the Weizmann Institute in Israel use deep reinforcement learning to dynamically adjust those parameters in real time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like an AI monitoring the city grid and changing the lights second by second to clear a jam. They simulated bacterial metabolism under varying oxygen levels and predicted ethanol yields with an error rate below 2%.
That is incredibly precise.
It is. Or look at oncology. Tools like deep metabolism from Tsinghua University trained on over 10,000 patient samples from the Cancer Genome Atlas. They classified tumor metabolic subtypes with 98% accuracy.
But how does classifying the tumor type actually save the patient? I mean, identification isn't a cure.
Because it identifies the precise metabolic vulnerabilities. It maps the tumor city grid and realizes, for instance, that this specific cancer has a severe glutamine addiction. It relies entirely on one highway to bring in energy.
Ah, I see.
Once the AI sees that, we can deploy a drug to block that exact highway, starving the tumor. You can't achieve that level of precision in an open, chaotic ecosystem. You need the bounded rules of the metabolic grid.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that the human body does not exist as a closed loop? The microbiome is absolutely not a city grid. There are no paved roads, you know?
Well,
It is a chaotic, open rainforest responding constantly to every piece of food you eat, every environment you walk through, every antibiotic you take. You cannot map it with simple input-output optimization because the variables are infinite.
so how does your AI handle that if there are no bounded rules? It just seems like guesswork.
It's not guesswork. This is why microbiome AI must model ecological predator-prey dynamics using physics-informed Lotka-Volterra equations.
Wait, for those listening who might not be, physics or ecology majors, what does a Lotka-Volterra equation actually do in the context of our gut?
It's the classic math used to track wolves and deer in the wild. If the wolves eat too many deer, the wolves starve and their population drops, which lets the deer population recover.
Okay.
The gut is exactly the same. We're tracking how one bacterial species, blooming, actively consumes the resources of another, or how the waste product of one bacteria is the primary food source for another. To understand this staggering web of life and death, we require unsupervised AI like variational autoencoders, or VAEs.
And how does a VAE process that kind of chaos?
A VAE essentially learns the shape of normalcy. It looks at millions of healthy people and figures out what normal ecological harmony looks like.
By looking at large data sets, I assume?
Massive ones. Models are training on huge, decentralized global cohorts, like the Earth Microbiome Project, spanning 50 countries, fused with the American Gut Project and Europe's MetaHit. Because the AI has learned the baseline of human health so deeply, when it looks at a new patient, it can spot a mere 15% rise in a bacteria class called proteobacteria.
Just 15%. That seems like it could just be noise.
Exactly, just 15%. But it's not noise. It immediately flags it as an inflammation risk. Proteobacteria are normally a tiny fraction of the gut, but they are opportunistic. When the ecosystem is stressed, they bloom, and they are heavily associated with inflammatory bowel disease. The complexity of this rainforest isn't a flaw. It's the very signal that gives us such incredible foresight.
I'm not totally convinced by that line of reasoning, because while identifying a 15% rise in proteobacteria is scientifically fascinating, translating that ecological observation into a scalable global solution is incredibly difficult.
Why is that difficult?
Well, a listener hearing this might be thinking, this is amazing, but I don't want a wearable AI tracking my gut bacteria 24/7, nor do most people in the world have access to that kind of continuous monitoring. When we look at real-world impact and global equity, metabolic engineering scales as an industrial solution.
You mean creating biological factories?
Precisely. Let's look at synthetic biology firms like Ginkgo Bioworks. By using AI to uncover those hidden metabolic rules we talked about earlier, they are engineering microbes specifically for insulin production.
Right, taking it out of the human body entirely.
Yet, and this directly addresses the massive diabetes burden in countries like India and Brazil, where over 100 million people are affected. We are using AI to optimize a biological factory that can produce life-saving therapeutics at scale, cheaply and reliably. Furthermore, a 2024 Nature Medicine study used AI to predict patient responses to metformin.
Metformin? The cheap, generic diabetes drug we've had for decades?
Yes, the AI realized that metformin acts as a metabolic disruptor in cancer cells. It chokes off the specific energy pathway the tumor relies on.
Oh, wow.
Well, I come at it from a different way. You're talking about industrial infrastructure, right? Manufacturing synthetic molecules, boxing them up, and distributing them to sick people. But microbiome AI enables decentralized, preventative epidemiology, which I argue is far more scalable and equitable.
How so? Let me give you a concrete example. Google DeepMind, in collaboration with Singapore's ASTR, developed an AI called Megagraph. This AI analyzes metagenomes to spot spikes in Fusobacterium nucleatum.
And what role does that specific bacteria play? I'm not familiar with that one.
Fusobacterium nucleatum actually binds to the cells lining the colon and creates a microenvironment that shields tumor cells from the immune system.
Oh, so it's actively protecting the cancer.
Exactly. Megagraph acts as a 25% early detector for colorectal cancer, just by spotting that bacterial shield forming. They validated this across multi-ethnic cohorts from the US, Japan, and Kenya. In low-resource settings, like parts of sub-Saharan Africa where colorectal cancer is surging by 5% yearly, you don't need a multi-million-dollar synthetic biology lab or a pharmaceutical supply chain to make an impact.
But wait, you still need to sequence the DNA, which requires heavy, expensive equipment.
Not anymore. That's the old paradigm. Portable nanopore sequencers, devices the size of a stapler, paired with edge AI can be deployed directly into the field.
A stapler? Seriously?
Seriously. A village-level clinic can screen a stool sample right there on a smartphone-linked device, and the AI can flag the precancerous microbial changes years before a tumor forms. That is true scalability. You aren't shipping them an engineered cure. You're giving them the predictive power to avoid the disease entirely using locally accessible technology.
And yet, if that early screening fails or, if a genetic predisposition overrides the environmental factors, those patients will still ultimately rely on the mechanistic therapies designed by metabolic AI.
Well, sure, as a backup.
expect inefficiency where it greedily consumes glucose to actually treat it. This suggests that AI's mastery over cellular metabolism provides the ultimate foundational toolkit. Whether it's designing novel molecules for Alzheimer's or engineering microbes for industrial insulin production, the deterministic engine of the cell is the bedrock of targeted therapy and synthetic biology. We are rewriting the source code of disease.
I hear you. But the goal of medicine should always be to prevent the code from compiling errors in the first place. AI's capacity to decode the microbiome's temporal chaos provides the ultimate early warning system for human health. Whether it's using graph neural networks to foresee major depressive disorder 8 months prior via a decline in gut bacteria like Coprococcus, or tracking lung microbiome shifts to identify high-risk viral infections 10 days before symptoms, predictive AI shifts the entire paradigm. We stop waiting for the machine to break.
You know, it is becoming clear that as we look at the evidence, there are profound points of convergence here.
Absolutely.
Neither field can truly advance without the other. If you predict an anomaly in the microbiome using your ecological models, you ultimately need to understand the metabolic pathways that anomaly disrupts in the human host. And we are already seeing this integration through multimodal fusion. We have convolutional neural networks processing the raw imaging data of sequencing, while natural language processing models simultaneously mine decades of global literature for strain functions and enzymatic interactions.
Yeah, and the most critical convergence is that human cognitive bandwidth is simply no longer the bottleneck in biological discovery. Whether we are looking at 100,000 metabolites on a city grid or 100 trillion microbes in a rainforest, AI has lifted the veil on systems that were previously impenetrable to the human mind.
Right.
We are moving toward federated learning models that can train across all these decentralized data sets globally. From the UK Biobank to Nigeria's African Microbiome Project, preserving patient privacy while building a truly holistic model of human biology.
And the future horizons for this integration are just staggering. I mean, we are looking at the imminent application of quantum computing to handle the exponential mathematical state spaces of both microbial ecosystems and metabolic flux. Imagine implantable AI biosensors, like those currently being prototyped at MIT and Tsinghua University.
Oh, those are incredible.
Right? These sensors could stream real-time metabolic and microbial data directly to a wearable AI device, providing minute-by-minute alerts about our internal state.
The idea of a wearable AI alerting you that your microbiome is signaling a localized inflammatory response and subsequently recommending a highly specific AI-generated synthetic community of bacteria for a personalized intervention. It sounds like science fiction, but the architecture for that reality is already being built right now. It relies entirely on merging the predictive ecology of the microbiome with the mechanistic intervention of metabolism.
Indeed. The full implications of AI in biology remain to be discovered. The massive datasets generated by our cells and our symbiotic microbes are finally speaking a language we can translate.
And it's a beautiful language.
It really is. It leaves us with a profound question to weigh as we look to the horizon of human health. When we finally pull back the hood on the human body, are we mechanics trying to engineer a flawless engine? Or are we ecologists trying to balance a chaotic, beautiful rainforest? We leave that for you to decide.
A fascinating landscape to navigate.
Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.